It's Saturday night, which means it's time to run it back. This is Run It Back NBA Week in Review.
The voice of the fan. Drop a bounce pass, throw down the rim rocker. Lay up off the glass, right past the shot blocker. I follow through like Kobe's is money. You can cash it. For news on LA hoops, come over to Peach Basket. Up to date sports, post game reports, debates and play by play coming straight off the court. The voice of the fan making noise, causing havoc. Zone a man up, you can ask Peach Basket. The Peach Basket, coming tune on there. The Peach Basket, where the news begins. We're dropping news like we're in the stands. Creative views from the Aztec fans.
We're the Peach Basket, voice of the fan, home of fan experts. We exist to amplify the voice of passionate basketball fans worldwide. Tonight, I'll be joined by Renee Roca and Isaac Edelman to recap their team's week. We'll also be doing a rapid recap of the week, and we're going to end today with a question of the day. Let's begin with a rapid recap. On Sunday, there were 6 games. That was an upset day in the NBA. The Hornets beat the Nets. The Magic beat the Knicks. On Monday, there were 9 games, highlighted by the Celtics overtime thriller over the Hornets. On Tuesday, there were 5 games. The San Antonio Spurs, who I know we'll be talking more about, played really well, but lost to the Lakers in overtime. Wednesday, there were 10 games. This was a battle of the beasts in the East, with the Heat coming out on top, beating the Nets. Now, this is twice we brought up the Nets, and twice it was a loss this week. They did not have a good week in Brooklyn. On Thursday, there were 6 games. The suddenly good Memphis Grizzlies beat the Warriors in overtime. We'll talk a little bit about the Grizz today, I think, because I know that they're up against the Heat. On Friday, then yesterday, there were 7 games. And I'll use highlighted in quotes here highlighted by Denver just destroying the Mavericks by 31 points. There's always going to be games like that, unfortunately for the Mavericks that happened to them last night against Denver. So that's our rapid recap of the week. Before we jump to our kind of more in-depth team recaps with the rest of the team, I wanted to call out one thing, and I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit bigger so y'all can see it if you're watching. You all have heard the term, the cream rises to the top, right? Which is another way of just really saying over time, the best players start doing what they always do. The best teams get up near the top of the standings. What impressed me when I looked at the stats this morning, was look at these names. The cream is already at the top, man. Curry is leading the association in points. Rudy Gobert in rebounds, Chris Paul in assists. These are the players you expect to see there at season's end. Usually, maybe oftentimes is a better word, you will see one rogue guy, one player who you know is having a great start, but you don't expect to maintain it. But not so much this season. These are the numbers for pretty much everybody that you would expect to see at season's end. Which is pretty surprising. Now, there are some people kind of below. Maybe Avery Bradley is a 3-point percentage. Not that he or anybody else here is going to keep shooting 60%, but seeing him at 3 is probably pretty surprising. There are others, but for the most part, the leaders are the people that you expect for the most part to see at season's end, which I thought was a little interesting. So with that kind of out of the way, let's dig into detailed recaps. I'm going to provide the recap for the Los Angeles Clippers. We are grateful to have a new Clippers contributor who hopefully will be joining us soon, certainly writing about the Clippers and maybe joining us here. But until then, y'all get me. The Clippers had a rough week. The Clippers were 1-2. They beat the Blazers, lost to the Cavs, and lost to the Blazers. Right, so they played the Blazers twice. when they beat the Blazers, there was a lot of talk about, this team's looking good. The Blazers, it's time to blow them up. Invariably, overreaction on both sides. What's happened then after that is the Clippers lost, like I said, to the Cavs and the Blazers again, or to the Blazers playing them a second time. And they looked really bad in those two losses. The Clippers, without Kawhi, were not necessarily expected to be championship contenders, but they were expected to be better than they've been playing. Anybody will tell you, one bounce here, one bounce there, things could be different. I saw a tweet today that said, based on their shooting percentages, they should be 4-1, but they're 1-4 overall. It is what it is. Right now, the Clippers had a bad week and overall a rough start to this season. So once again, the Clippers 1-2. Is there concern? Yeah, there's got to be. I made a point last night in watching the game that it's okay to have one game where you don't play well, where there's a lack of energy, where there's just no motivation. It's not okay to have that 2 games in a row. And unfortunately, that's what happened to the Clippers. They just did not show up against the Cavs or the Blazers. I mean, they just did not play well, did not shoot well. Paul George had a really good game last night. But, when you have a good game and a loss, it matters a whole lot less. So, yes, there's definitely some concern. No particular team news, nothing of note. But other than to say, the Clippers are in need of a win. They absolutely need a better week next week than they had this week. So, with apologies to the guys coming next who are, really, really, really well-versed and connected to their team, that is my Clippers update. Now, we're going to – oh, wait, I forgot to drop my pin, man. Sorry. That was me in LA. We're going to go to San Antonio area. I'm going to make sure to drop the pin now, and we'll bring in Renee Roca. Renee has been covering the Spurs with us now for 2 seasons, knows the team really well, big fan, and also the writer of what will hopefully be a weekly column called I Said It, I Own It, where he just says outlandish things, but he sticks by them. He says it, he owns it. Renee, glad you're here. Thank you. Tell us about the Spurs. What kind of week did they have?
They were 0-2. So along with everything that 0-2 can that comes with that, they are right now a philosophical challenge. And I don't mean that the players or the coach. A lot of fans are having a really hard time with this season already. And I understand a lot of them are young, and this is probably the first time in their lives that they've seen the Spurs, I wouldn't say play poorly, because they're not playing poorly. They're just not winning games, if that makes sense. I think you know what that means. We know what that means, because you guys everybody in the Peach Basket are true basketball fans and know what I'm getting at. All of the things that I said in the preview are coming true. So I should have yelled, I said it, I'll own it then as well. They've had a different scorer in all 5 games this season, which is something that I said was probably going to happen, is they don't have a tried and true guy to go to, a go-to guy. They have nobody to lean on late. They've been playing with high energy. They play decent defense. They've taken leads in pretty much every game, sometimes double-figure leads. They just can't close the deal. And it is what it is. They just don't have the personnel right now, or the experience, rather. This is something they have to work through. One of our favorite players, Jakob Poeltl, has been playing pretty well. I nicknamed him Jakob. I named him Yak Diesel. He's been playing. He's a serviceable 5. I had said that they needed interior presence. Well, he's providing that. He needs a sidekick. He needs a solid 4. And I'm not being demanding in saying that, am I? I think everybody could use a solid power forward at this point. it's rough. I thought this would happen. The losses, it becomes discouraging. We really don't like to see our teams lose, but we have to take into account what's happening. And it's just young guys having to get experience. And as far as team news goes, they sent their first round pick, Joshua Primo, down to their G League affiliate in Austin. And I think that's a good idea, even though this is still a team that's short on experience. He'll get better or more playing time in Austin than he will in San Antonio. That's basically what's going on, Jose.
So much to talk about. Let me ask you a couple of things. Number one, what I like about the Spurs, having just watched them against the Lakers, especially when I compare them to the Clippers and the week the Clippers had, the Spurs play with energy. Now, it's one thing to not have the personnel like you mentioned, right? But they don't have the personnel, but they play really hard. They play really well. They play well together. I mean, I would think from the outside looking in, that's a Popovich thing, man. That's a system thing. We may not, win a lot of games because we don't have the personnel, but we're going to play hard. I mean, am I right in that assessment for the Spurs?
That's exactly correct, and I would say that the only criticism I would ever give this team is for a lack of effort, and I don't see that happening, and that goes back to the coach, exactly as you said. Greg Popovich we know who he is, and the players do respond to him. They have mentioned that. They've said it. I believe Lonnie Walker the other night, again, that just reminded me, the other night, I think the Dallas game, Greg Popovich and DeJounte Murray were having a conversation late in the game that they're really bonding. Let's put it that way. You can see that he's listening to his coach, and his coach is coaching. And it reminds me a little bit, not to go that far, but it reminds me a little bit of Tony Parker's early years. And I'm not saying that's going to happen here, but this is a player responding to his coach. And, Greg Popovich has a great relationship with other players in the league. I don't know if you saw after the Lakers game, he and LeBron James were very chummy. After the Dallas game, he and Luka Doncic were very chummy. Players respect Greg Popovich, and I imagine that his players do as well. That's all on him. Yes, you're correct.
Yeah, outstanding. And listen, at the end of the day, that's all I want for my basketball team. I want them to play hard. The wins and losses, obviously you'd rather win than lose. But I want them to play with a little bit of passion, and that's what we didn't see in LA for the Clippers, and what I've seen when I watched the Spurs. All right, appreciate it. As always, a great recap for the San Antonio Spurs. Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and put you back in the bullpen, so to speak, and we'll bring in Isaac. Isaac runs a phenomenal site called FL Teams. They are a partner of ours based out of Florida, actually cover all things Florida sports, not just basketball. So if you want to hear about or read about anything related to Florida sports, flteams.com is the place to go. Isaac, thank you again for joining us. Give us an update on the Heat.
Well, as always, Jose, thanks so much for allowing me to be on here to share my thoughts about the Heat. And I first want to start off by saying simply the Heat season has started off as good as possible. This week, the Heat were 3-0. And before diving into their wins and the specifics and details of the wins, I just want to say that the Heat don't even have Victor Oladipo, and they're doing this good. So the Heat are not at full strength, and they are already playing well, and they have played some tough competition thus far. I want to first talk about the last game against the Charlotte Hornets. It was on national television, and the Heat stopped Miles Bridges. I don't know if you guys know a lot about Miles Bridges, but you're going to have to know a lot about him because so far this season he is playing terrific. The Heat shut him down. And what is Jimmy Butler doing? Jimmy Butler, as we saw last year, was a guy who averaged close to 20 points per game, and he got most of his credit for stealing the ball and playing defense and dishing the ball to other players. This year, the Heat have Kyle Lowry, who hasn't played that well thus far, but he has gotten everyone involved on the Heat. Who has he gotten involved in the Heat's offense? Tyler Hero. Tyler Hero arguably has been the Heat's best player this season, and that is amazing. Last year was his sophomore season. The year before, which was the NBA bubble, was his freshman season. His freshman season in the bubble was absolutely amazing. Last year, he averaged better numbers per game, but it wasn't as big as a step as I and other Heat fans would have liked. But this year, he is really playing well. I know Jose was saying this in our Slack chat, which, by the way, is terrific. He is an early sixth man of the year candidate. And I love that because Goran Dragic last year at one point was thought to be a sixth man of the year candidate. And obviously he was traded to the Raptors with Precious Achiuwa for Kyle Lowry. But let's quickly just discuss the scores of the last few games for the Heat. The Heat beat the Hornets 114-99. The Heat then beat the Nets, who are a very good team, even without Kyrie Irving, but the Heat haven't struggled against these good teams, and obviously they didn't, winning 106-93. And then the Heat beat the Magic, who we cover on FL Teams, 107-90. So the Magic, maybe not that tough of an opponent, but beating the Nets is a very, very, very good sign, and beating the Hornets is another good sign.
Yeah, I did say that Tyler Hero looks like an MVP, or pardon me, not an MVP candidate, but a sixth man of the year candidate. I think you're crazy not to have him on the list. I said it. I'll own it. Apologies to Renee. But yeah, he's looking great. And you brought up, a point that I just didn't put it together until just now. Think about this, man. Every player like Tyler Hero, who's in their third NBA season, this is their first season playing a regular NBA season, a full 82 games. This is his first season. That's just amazing to me. And I wonder if, we had a chance to talk to Tyler Hero or anybody who's the third year in, do they think that was good? Do they think that was bad? I mean, from my perspective, thinking about kind of easing you in with, that bubble experience with a lot less games, and then a few more games with, again, just relatively no crowds. In the second season to this, I think that might have made it easier, the transition easier. I don't know, but it's fascinating to me that everybody who's playing starting their third season this season, this is their first full season in the NBA.
That's a good point to discuss. Obviously, Tyler Hero thrived in the NBA bubble environment. Last year, he didn't do good. And obviously, it was in a normal environment where you traveled.
Yeah.
And this year he is traveling, but there's now fans. And by the way, Hero loves the spotlight. I'm going to remember this, I think, for the rest of my life. I don't know if you know this shot, but remember the shot against the Sixers, that amazing 3-pointer? It was in his rookie season. It forced overtime for the Heat. And, as a Heat fan, we know those moments, but Tyler Hero loves the spotlight, and I'm sure NBA fans know. He said he wants to be in the same, and he should be considered in the same NBA tier as, the likes of Luka Doncic. And so far, he is living up to that tier. Matter of fact, he has played better than those players in that tier, such as Luka Doncic.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm a fan, and I hope he can continue because he's been really fun to watch, shooting the ball just unbelievably well. All right, Isaac, as always, a great recap of the Miami Heat. Thank you. I hope continued success for that team out in the East. Now, I'm going to go ahead and bring Renee back, and we're going to pivot to the NBA question of the day. No real rhyme or reason here. I just kind of think about the NBA, and basically I like to ask questions about things that, maybe people are talking about. The NBA season is still pretty new. I didn't want to ask anything about Ben Simmons or Kyrie Irving. I didn't want to ask anything about the Lakers or the Nets because I think all of that is talked out. So this is today's question of the day. We're going to ponder it. We're going to debate it. We're going to discuss it. Should the NBA award an MVP for both conferences like Major League Baseball does? I first heard this probably a year or two ago, and I was fascinated by the concept. I'm gonna go ahead and give my thoughts first, and I was questioning whether how to do this, but let me just go ahead and give you my thoughts, which will kind of give you an idea as to why I asked this question. My first thought was to push back. No, that's stupid. I don't like it because that's not how we've ever done it. But then, right when I thought of MLB, and there is an MVP in the East and in the West, and nobody's ever given it any thought. I mean, it just makes sense. And I started to kind of think about it, and yeah, man, I like it. I think the biggest problem with doing this, and I'll put problem in quotes, is you obviously can't stop at MVP then, right? Then you're going to have a 6-man of the year for each conference. You're going to have a most improved for each conference. And I don't know that that's a bad idea. I kind of tend to like it. I'm about probably 51-49, inching more towards liking it than not. I think the argument against might be, listen, there's more players in Major League Baseball. There's certainly more teams in Major League Baseball. And you could make that argument. But I think because of the fact that the East doesn't play the West often, I mean, there's 2 games in a regular season. What I mean by a regular 82-game season, they play each other twice. I like it. I like the idea. East players really feast on East players, West on West players. Let them have an individual MVP. Let's take it in order. Isaac, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are the following. I think the question should be MLB question of the day. If you look at the NBA, if you look at the NFL and the NHL, there is only one MVP, and there's not one in each conference. So I think the MLB should be the spotlight here. And I think what they're doing is wrong, meaning what the NBA is doing right now, having one MVP combined for both conferences, is the smart move. Why, you ask? Well, it's as simple as this.
Ask.
In the MLB, you have a National League MVP and an American League MVP, but no one knows who is the more deserving MVP, right? You could speculate. Does Mike Trout deserve to win MVP or Jacob deGrom? Which one? But in the NBA, you know who the best player for that season is, otherwise known as the most valuable player, because there's only one MVP. So basically, if the NBA wanted to be like the MLB, having an MVP for both conferences, I would be fine with it. But I just think having one MVP other than 2 is better. And I think it's been proven, and there's evidence, because the NFL and NHL have the same strategy as the NBA. The MLB is the only sports league that doesn't have that strategy.
Interesting. All right. Yeah, and I do have to correct myself. I said East and West for Major League Baseball, as Isaac points out. Yeah, it's American League and National League. Okay, interesting. All right. So I'm giving it a thumbs up. Isaac with a solid thumbs down. Renee, you got to break the tie, man. What are your thoughts on MVP award?
I think I had the same knee-jerk reaction that heck no. But no, you know what? The idea is to sell the sport, to sell the league, and I think that this is another way to do it. Now, I agree with what Isaac said, that you have a clear-cut MVP in the NBA, but if you have an Eastern Conference MVP, a Western Conference MVP, it opens up debate. So it opens up opportunities for us to talk about it here and to write countless articles. And well, right. I think, Kevin Durant, well, it could be Steph Curry. No, I think, and it goes on and on and on. And it's more for us to play around with and to, have our own discussions. So, yeah, I like the idea of it being neatly one guy, but hey, why not 2?
It's so funny.
So, I'll say I like it.
I started saying, I'm 51-49, and then I'm listening to Isaac, and I'm like, oh, no, he's right. Now I'm listening to Renee, and I'm thinking, no, he's right. So, and Isaac, even you said you would be okay with it if they did it. You just have this.
I would be okay.
you'd have this opinion. Renee, you bring up a really interesting point, right? The NBA, I've always said, has been a league that really embraces the entertainment aspect of what they do. And I think a really good example of that is this, the top 75 thing that came out. It comes out, and the very first thing people do is they debate it, right? Who's missing? Who didn't deserve to be there? Should they have kept the top 50? And it generated lots of good content, lots of good conversation. And at the end of the day, that's what the NBA wants to do. They have to sell their product. So creating these two MVPs, if they were potentially to do it, yeah, you are absolutely right, Renee, to say, can you imagine the endless debate? Is it Durant? Is it Curry? And to get to Isaac's point, like in Major League Baseball, is it DeGrom or is it Mike Trout? Answer Mike Trout. But that's the whole point of doing something like this, I think. So anyway, I'm solidly on 51-49 for Isaac. Have we convinced you, or are you still against?
I really am sorry for not giving a definite answer, because I never said that I'm against it. Again, I like, that there's just one clear-cut MVP. But listening to Renee, and as someone who wants to work in the NBA and in other sports in the future, selling your product, selling people to watch the NBA and to buy apparel and that stuff is important. And what Renee said absolutely sold me, because, again, I want to be a sports broadcaster. I want to be a sports writer. I want to work in sports, and selling your product is what you need to do. And what Renee said is absolutely correct.
Boom. Right on. Well, way to go, Renee. Yeah. All right.
I'll own it.
You said it, you own it. Outstanding.
I'll own it.
That was great. Yeah, I think we've come to a consensus now. Let's see what the NBA does with it. That is it. That is our show. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week on Saturday to once again run it back.
The voice of the fan. Drop a bounce pass, throw down the rim rocker. Lay up off the glass, right past the shot blocker. I follow through like Kobe's is money. You can cash it. For news on LA hoops, come over to Beach Basket. Up-to-date sports, post-game reports, debates and play-by-play coming straight off the court. The voice of the fan making noise, causing havoc. Zone a man up, you can ask Peach Basket. The Peach Basket, coming tune on there. The Peach Basket, where the news begins. We're dropping news like we're in the stand.